Hey guys, my name's Sean Lynch. I'm the product manager on Google App Engine. And today I have with me sort of a fairly complete cross-section of the App Engine engineering team. Before I go on, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and say which component you're working on?
Hey, I'm Peter. I work on a number of things, mainly task queue and cron systems.
And I'm Kevin Gibbs. I'm the tech lead and manager for the App Engine team. So I do a little bit of everything. I'll also mention this is a fireside chat, which I think is a great thing about Google I/O. But it means that you guys are just here to ask questions, or we're here to answer them and to hang out. So of course, use moderator, but also don't hesitate to ask questions or keep it real or ask us the hardest questions you can think of, because we just want to connect with you guys and help out.
Hi, I'm Alfred Fuller. I work on the data store, and I do a lot of the query stuff. And yeah, if you want to know a lot about that, there's a talk tomorrow about the query stuff. But I'll answer any questions you have now, and hopefully not to give too much of it away.
I said Alfred is the query planner. My name is Max Ross. I work on the data store with Alfred, and I do anything else that's related to Java.
Brett Slatkin, I work on the runtimes and APIs team.
Guido from Rossum, anything Python related, the admin console, the domain console, App Engine for Business that was demoed this morning during the keynote.
Yeah, and I'm Dan Sanderson. I'm the technical writer lead for App Engine. I also wrote that book that's upstairs.
For sale in your local bookstore.
And there's actually, I think, one or two other App Engine engineers floating around in the crowd there, so you may see them join us up on stage if you ask a particularly hot button question. So that's it. Oh, two quick things. Yeah, there's a microphone there. Please feel free to line up and ask questions. It's probably, if you're going to, you think you can ask a particularly interesting one, that's a great place to do it. If you do come up and ask, it would be great if you could give us just your name and your company. I suspect that we've worked with a couple of you on email or in the groups or on IRC over the last few years, so it'd be really cool if we could put the name to the face. Otherwise, I think, yeah, I'm just going to be reading questions from the moderator, and we'll be taking questions from the mic. And there's a couple empty seats up here in the front that's got the placards on. Yeah, feel free. Yeah, come join us. It should be, if you go to the session page on I/O, it should be embedded in the wave. But I'll try and post it up as well here. Yeah, I know. Okay. Actually, we've got one up front.
Hi, I'm Max from IBM Research. Is your SQL support going to be full SQL, and will it include transactions?
Sure. It was, so the question, if I heard correctly, was is the SQL support going to be full SQL or just?
And will it support transactions?
Will it support transactions?
Yeah. I guess elaborate a little bit on the SQL support that you're planning.
Yeah.
Full SQL support, will it include transactions?
Meaning, is it going to be like a Google
yes,
SQL?
Definitely. So, that support's still really coming together right now, and I don't have a lot of details about it. We don't know what all the details will be. But what I can tell you is that it is based on real SQL databases, real SQL servers, and the features that you expect from SQL. It's not just a query language or just a tiny feature. It's really what I think you guys would all believe is very familiar SQL. Now, I can't guarantee that like every esoteric features you've used are there, and some may be particularly challenging, things like triggers, things like that. But I think that it's something that any of you would definitely recognize as a standard traditional SQL database server.
Will it scale like a data store?
Will it scale?
As much as SQL scales. So, I mean, what I just said, I would be lying to you if I said that that could also magically scale. Because, the reasons why SQL databases have trouble scaling are natural reasons based on their design. It's not that SQL database programmers didn't write it well. It's just that those are the limitations of a design like that. So I would expect that you would have the same set of issues you might have with the standard SQL database that you would run yourself. I think the differences are that you don't have to run it yourself. We'll keep it running, we'll make it available to you, And if you need to scale that, you probably would use similar strategies that you use today in other hosting environments, sharding, using multiple SQL databases and things like that.
But will we have to manage these, or you manage this on our behalf?
Will we have to manage it ourselves?
Because
some of those are getting it's a little too soon for me to say, okay. Because management can mean a lot of different things, so I don't want to overpromise something.
Well, like charting, for instance. You mentioned charting, so will it auto-chart?
Oh, no, I don't believe that there would be anything that does the charting automatically for you. I think that's something that's too natural to what you're actually doing. But, being perfectly honest with you, I think it's too soon to say about some of this, but I think the best way for you to think about it is that it's a SQL server that you can turn on and use. But, I mean, Max, maybe there's something you want to say about it.
This microphone's working. The only thing that I would add is, I definitely recognize that there's lots of pain points associated with sharding, and I don't feel like anybody has really addressed those in a way that removes all of those pain points yet, and that's something we should certainly look at, but I think, as Kevin said, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. Right now, we don't have a SQL offering that you can use today. And so the first step for us is to do the work to make that happen so that you have a basic SQL offering that you can use today. And then for the more advanced stuff, we'll take it as far as we can go. But the other thing I would add is, if you find yourself in a position with your SQL database where it's not scaling for you, you do have this other thing called the data store, which has been around for a couple of years now and works really well and scales really well. So you have more options at your disposal than you otherwise would.
I'm taking a lot of time, but this is my last comment. So there's a lot of criticism about this. I mean, I'm coming from a company that provides a solution in SQL, and so I'm not trying to defend this because I'm from research. And I can tell you that part of the reason why you're probably doing it is because customers are asking for it. And it's because they have existing application, and it's because it works. It doesn't scale maybe to the extent that data store does, but it provides certain guarantees. And why? Because it has a solid mathematical foundation behind it and 20 years of research. So there is advantages to a model like this. And I thought where you were getting at is something more like SQL Azure, where you would try to provide some level of scaling with that. But that's fine. Just a comment.
Just before we go on, I want to get our two new additions to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Don Schwarz. I work on App Engine, primarily Java support.
Hi, I'm Toby Rielts, and I do the same.
Good timing then. So I was very excited last year when you guys announced the Java support on the App Engine, and I've been advocating it to many people as a solution. At the same time, I'm embracing the Groovy on Rails metaphor because I'm kind of jealous of the Ruby guys. So we built this entire thing on Groovy on Rails for the App Engine, but it doesn't work because there's a 30-second time limit in there that by the time the Rails initializes, I basically run out of time. And I know in your roadmap there's plans for having ability to reserve instance or keep it running, which would be very, very useful, except I just don't see you guys implementing it. And it seems like you're going to tangent, and now you're having this App Engine for enterprise, which to me is a bad news because to me it sounds like it's distraction. Rather than finishing that and doing it really, really well for the Java people, now you're kind of expanding and you're kind of making yourself very, very thin. And I see it now as a trend across all the sort of Google different things. They do so many different things, and they're doing it half good, but none of them are, you're not doing any of them great. So I guess my point is, what's your plan for the Java support? Are you going to really want to support it, or should we just leave and go to Amazon or some other solution? Thank you.
We said ask the tough ones. So is it fair to say your question is, are we going to continue to add the additional support for Java with reserved instances? No, I completely hear you. Do you want to tackle this one? Oh, are we focusing on reserved instances to pay attention to Java? I think I'll jump on it. We have probably just an equivalent representation up here on stage between Python and Java. So in terms of language support, I don't think that we're spreading ourselves too thin. I think that we've actually got it very covered. We definitely hear the reserved instances, or the feature that we have on our roadmap there is particularly painful, not just for the guys who are trying to go beyond Java and use other JVM-based languages, but even on the Python side, the guys that are running into it are using thicker frameworks. So it's a pain point that we definitely see, and we're working hard to address it. Right. I think we would probably have something to show you before the year is out.
You know, I would echo what Sean said. It is a very acute problem. We're very aware of it. We are working on multiple solutions for that specific problem. Some of them are already working internally. Some are being coded right now internally. So I don't like to make predictions stronger than that, but I do know when we've got the code working and ready, we try to get out there as soon as we can. But believe me, I know, these guys know, Don and Toby knows, it hurts right now, it's a problem. And so we know we have to do something better and get it out there. So we're working on it as best we can.
Yeah, one thing to point out is the stuff on our roadmap is things that we're actually working on. We are actively working on. It doesn't make it onto the roadmap if, you know, we just get a lot of feature requests about it. This is things that we're actually trying to build.
Yeah, I was crossing my fingers that today you announced that.
Oh.
And I was very disappointed to see you announce this enterprise whole new thing and not announce the thing that I was investing so much money.
I apologize. I think, so the question was basically, are we walking away? Oh, you got it? Okay.
Sorry, no, I'm a little hard of hearing, so sometimes I have trouble with the questions. I definitely hear what you're saying. And you know what? I was concerned about that in our messaging too. Because I wanted you guys to know that both of these things are really critically important. If you read what it says on the App Engine for Business site, if you look at our FAQ, if you look at some of this stuff, we emphasize in the strongest words that we can how committed we are both to App Engine as it exists today for highly scalable internet consumer sites, for the platform you guys have all used, as well as the enterprise stuff we're getting into now. Now, what you heard me talk about today was largely focused on intranet apps. But we also plan to, just in the same way, and this is mentioned more in the docs, have that same set of tools, that same thing that we're building there, appropriate for ISVs, for people who are reselling, for people who are just building businesses on App Engine but want those same things. Now, we're trying to take over the world. We're trying to take on every single thing we can, but we have to do it in steps. So it's something that we really care about. And particularly, there is some language about this. There is some stuff you can read that I hope will instill you with confidence. But I promise you that we are committed to both of those sides, and we're doing the best we can to connect them.
All right, third question now? Is that what we're up to?
This is the first question, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay, this question is about Google App Engine's take on transaction isolation levels. I understand that you say that you support read committed, but typically in an ACID compliant database, when you have read committed, when you start a transaction and when you do updates, when you read the same entity again, what you get is a modified entity, right? But in the case of Google App Engine, after you modify within a transaction scope, you get the older entity, right? And perhaps because of distributed data stored. Question number one, how do you claim that this is read committed? Number two, if you're building business applications of some kind or real world application, how do you come across or how do you overcome this problem?
So to answer the first part, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we've been careful in our language to say that the closest isolation, or sorry, the the closest thing to the existing, what are they? Yeah, the closest identifier to what the data store has is read committed, but it is not read committed in the absolute sort of most generally agreed upon sense. And what you're describing is the way in which it differs slightly. We offer strong consistency, which means that if in a transaction you write your data, you commit that transaction, you read it back, you're going to get your data. But what you describe is a quirk, and it is an artifact of the implementation of how we do things. And I realize that it differs a little bit from what you expect when you say read committed, but read committed is the closest thing out there to what we're doing. So, you know, I sleep okay with that. I apologize if it has confused you, but I think we've tried to be careful about not saying, yes, this is read committed and that's all you need to understand.
Right. And
yeah, that's fair. So, I mean, how does this impact you? Did this bite you in an unexpected way?
yeah, for example, if you're trying to build a business application, for example, and let's say you have an inventory and you have line items, you add a quantity for that particular inventory. Now you do a sum of, or you query all the list of line items within the same transaction. What you get is the wrong number against a number which is, I mean, I understand if it's Twitter, you know, till you commit, if you query for a word like Google I/O, it's okay to miss that till the commit happens, right? But if you're running a business transaction and you want to do a sum, and then based on that you want to do the next transaction, whether the quantity has exceeded or not, then you run into a problem. Especially if you're trying to support the same JDO implementation, I think you would run into the problem, right? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I understand the scenario you're talking about. I don't have a magic bullet for you. You know, we can say things like, you know, you can write your data and then you can do your querying in a separate transaction, and then you're guaranteed that you're going to see that sort of thing. But I realize that's not the most natural way to approach that problem, especially if you've been doing it with a relational database. So yeah, it's one of those gotchas that's out there, and I'm sorry that it bit you.
Okay. Can I ask a second question? I'm sorry.
I think it's not fair to everyone else.
Go ahead.
So, sorry. In fact, Sean, do you want to read to the highest voted moderator questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is for you guys. What would you say has been the biggest lesson learned since GAE's launch 2 years ago?
What was the biggest lesson learned since GAE's launch? Well, that's a fun one. I'll pass the mic around for that one. Well, I'll think. You guys have an answer off the top of your head you want to say? This is Alon.
Oh yeah, hi, my name's Alon. I'd say one of the biggest lessons that we've learned in terms of the way we write our infrastructure and things is to keep everything configurable, because you never know how things are going to be used or where the pain points are going to be. So being able to have more knobs and buttons to push and turn has been really helpful.
On a similar note, I think one of the things that I picked up, in fact, last year was that transparency is really key. So it's really important for the developer to be able to see what's going on with their system.
I think something that is a lesson learned, one that we saw a little bit coming, but sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that you saw coming, but you didn't realize that it wasn't a cat running at you, it was a tiger running at you in terms of the scale of the problem and how bad and how acute the situation was, is in terms of the limits in App Engine. I know a lot of these, especially in our first year of development of App Engine, man, those really stung, and they were really hard to work with, you know, whether it was high CPU requests or hitting quotas too soon or those sort of things. And as I hope you've seen, we've worked really hard to clear those out. And if you look at our roadmap for the platform, we're working really hard to clear out the rest of them too. We knew those were going to be bad, but I don't think it was apparent, at least to me, just how bad some of those were. So we're trying to do everything we can to make it better.
I guess the biggest thing I've learned is the ridiculously crazy things you can build with very small amounts of tools. Basically, I can use Memcache to do almost anything now, I feel like. You can come to my talk tomorrow, I'll tell you about it. But they're very small constructs. It kind of goes along with what Alon was saying about having more buttons and knobs. There's a few very low-level constructs you can supply, like task queue, or a certain level of transactionality, or massively parallel gets, or list properties that give you a huge amount of power with just some very small tools, and you can combine them together to create even more complicated constructs in user space, you know? So it's been really cool seeing what we can build in user space, you know, like Linux has futexes, and we have all of our other crazy stuff that's kind of like that. And we'll be showing a lot of it tomorrow with some of the talks from me and Mike Izatsky. So you should come and check those out.
Yeah, the next one is App Engine for Business will support SSL for custom top-level domains. It seems primarily geared towards enterprise applications. Will it be available for non-enterprise applications, public?
Yes. These features may be part of App Engine for Business, but there will be a part of App Engine for Business that you can use for your business applications that are for inside your company and for outside of your company. So you'll be able to use these in the situations that you need. The pricing for these features may be different for you. All of that's still being developed. We don't have those things figured out. But will you be able to use this to build the sort of apps that you want to do? Yes.
Okay. Actually, let's grab another mic.
Hi, my question is about the best approach for delivering sort of real-time notifications to a web application, especially with new standards coming along like WebSocket. I know that might be somewhat at odds with the model of how App Engine works, where you can't have a socket open waiting for data to flow. And I saw a demo this morning with some of the new widgets, the data presentation widgets. And one thing I noticed that caught my attention is they had sort of data pop up sort of on demand, and that was running on App Engine. I wonder if you can talk about if there's anything special going on there, and how,
Yeah, sure.
what's the best approach to do that?
Thanks for your question. I'm really happy you asked that. I'll give you $5 later. Tomorrow we have a session with Brett Bavar and Moshe Letvin on the App Engine channel API, which is comment or browser push as an API. And it reuses a lot of the same infrastructure we use at Google for long polling or comment in applications like Buzz and Gmail. And this is the idea of kind of like with our XMPP API, you have a JID that you send messages to. You'll be able to have an addressable channel that you can send messages to in a deferred manner, either during a request, from a task queue request, however you want to address it. So you can do all kinds of broadcast mechanisms or direct messages between users and basically everything you could want to do like that. The plan, so we're going to be, we talked about it on the blog a little bit, and it's going to be a trusted tester thing at first, but we're kind of getting along with getting it out for everybody. And the plan is to get it implemented in such a way that under the covers we could replace it with WebSockets with absolutely no knowledge from the application developer standpoint. So once the browser is capable of doing WebSockets instead of long polling over some weird bidirectional HTTP channel, it would just happen. So that's that. Yes, 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 and yes. We're doing all of those things, and so you should definitely come to Moshe's talk at 1 tomorrow, and you can also and their talk. Basically, everyone's showing this off because it's so great. We all want it. So yes. Moshe's in the back. If you want to put his hand up, he's your man. But don't hurt him.
So hi, I'm Dave Peck. I work with Walkscore.com. And we love the URL fetch API. We've been making heavy use of asynchronous URL fetch. But unfortunately, it still doesn't go far enough for us in some cases. We run into the reality of systems that take a very long time to respond, even with small amounts of data. So we're wondering if you have plans to support on your roadmap URL fetch with webhook style callbacks. And sort of flip side to that, URL fetch directly to the blob store.
Sure. So the question was, are we planning on support for URL fetch with some sort of asynchronous callback
Yes.
after it's complete for long-running minute, hour, however long it runs?
It's definitely something that we are interested in. We know it's an acute problem right now that just doing URL fetch requests that go over 10 seconds, which, I mean, to me, it doesn't seem quite like a good idea that web services often take longer than that, but the reality is they do. And some of them, I've seen some that like, they're supposedly take 30 minutes, an hour to return, and that's a normal operation, which unusual to me, but that's how the world works.
Unfortunately,
both on the case of doing ones that are just a little bit longer, we just need a little bit more room to grow, and ones that are a lot longer. We're very aware of this. It's very much on our mind, and we're trying to do something about it. I think we might see some things in the sooner, like the nearer term future, that help you get a little bit further.
Okay.
Help you get more into the 30-second, minute sort of range. We'd also want to do some stuff further out that could allow it to be entirely indefinite for whatever you're doing.
Right. And as far as URL fetching directly to the blob store, is that something that's on your radar screen too? We're talking to services that are handing us data back that's in the, you know, dozens to hundreds of megabytes.
So you want to URL fetch a blob out of the blob store and read it?
No, I'd like to perform a URL fetch to a remote service and have its results, assuming they're valid, end up directly in the blob store.
Interesting. Will we support URL fetch with the results directly into the blob store?
Yeah.
I mean, the gist of the answer is that we're trying to figure out a way to pipe everything into everything else.
Sure.
So, you know, just take the combinatorial, you know, expansion of every possible thing, and yes, we're trying to do that.
Great.
I mean, we want to do that because it's natural and makes sense. So can I save the result of a task queue task in the blob store? Same question, right?
Right.
So yeah, totally aware, and so we have nothing to say yet, but we know.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks. I won't ask about all the other permutations.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Chris Hanley, Space Telescope Science Institute. As a heavy user and sometimes committer to NumPy, I was wondering what we could do to convince you to add it to the list of acceptable Python libraries that we could use.
The question was, can we support NumPy?
You know, we get that question from time to time. We would like to. It is difficult for us to support each one of those libraries that comes along like that. So we don't have any plans at the moment right now. But it's something that we need to hear more from you guys so that we can find ways to either get libraries like that working for you or to do something that allows you to work around it, to give you another way to achieve the same thing. I know how popular NumPy is at the scientific community and a lot of things that are going on there. And so I think it's something that we need to hear more often. So the reality of the matter is that things get done by engineering teams when we're made aware of how important this is to you and how acute it is. So please keep asking. I've heard it from you, and try to get just to hear you more about that library and others, so we can get it together for you.
Well, I was going to say it's pretty much critical to any of the scientific community that, and we're resistant to work at getting it into the core. I mean, Guido has come out and said that he doesn't even think it should be in the core just because of the development time frame of NumPy versus the core libraries for Python. So I guess I'll just advocate for it being added and tell all my friends to say me too on the bug list.
We certainly hear you.
This question is on two best practices that you recommend. One on the denormalization portion, where you recommend.
Yeah, sorry.
Two best practices that you recommend. One on the denormalized schema in Bigtable, and the other one is read performance better than write performance, recommending more of reads rather than writes. But I think the reality is when you have a denormalized schema, you repeat the data, and therefore when one entity changes, you pretty much change the data in multiple entities, which essentially means you will have to write more. So how do you deal with this conflict when you build real world applications?
So let me see if I heard the question right. It was the best practices around enum based data? Denormalized data.
Denormalized data.
Denormalized data, and I missed the first part.
So that's one. The
Okay.
second one being write performance being slower than read. So
and how to handle that when your application is just realistically more write focused.
And not just that, in a normal application, if your application becomes more and more denormalized,
I see.
then when one entity changes, you essentially have to change in multiple entities, and therefore you're essentially increasing the number of writes.
Right. So the question is, what are the best practices around denormalized data? And because we're recommending denormalized, that causes more writes. That's sort of in conflict with our reads are better performance and writes. What do you have to say?
So it's a tough spot. If you want to, the more ways you want to query your data, then the more ways that you're going to need to duplicate that data, whether you're using our built-in indexes in order to be able to get those scans, or whether you're building your own. The denormalized data are basically you're building indexes that you can scan yourselves. So the more ways that you want to slice and dice your data, the more expensive your writes are going to become, because that's more stuff to maintain. That's the trade-off. I don't have any magic for you with the data store, right? If you really need really, really flexible querying, then you're probably looking forward to our SQL offering. Alfred in his talk tomorrow is going to show you ways that we are planning to make querying on the data store much, much, much better. It's going to reduce the number of indexes. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you need to be at his talk.
Okay.
Okay.
It's the last one tomorrow.
It's the last talk tomorrow.
But
you should definitely come to his talk. He's gonna shatter myths.
Okay.
But the thing that you're running up against is a fundamental limitation of the guarantees that we give you with the data store, which is that we're not going to pull entire result sets into memory. We're not going to do joins in memory. There needs to be an efficient scan, and in order to line up those efficient scans, somebody has to write the data. And it's either going to be us on your behalf through composite indexes, or it's going to be you writing the data yourself when you're denormalizing.
Oh, I'm not a data store expert like Max, but I was just going to say quickly that still the number of reads compared to the number of writes are like usually typically order of magnitude, like several orders of magnitude, like 1,000 times or something. And you can do your writes often like task queues or things like things asynchronously or whatever. And whereas like your reads are often pretty much blocking in requests and whatnot. So usually still you can optimize for your reads and have your reads be very fast and have your writes take longer, but off asynchronously.
Sure. The next one is, can you guys talk about what you learned from the downtime in February? It was impressively handled, thank you. And we'd like some insight from your experience. Yeah. What did we learn from the downtime in February?
That's a good question. I think if you look at the postmortems that we published, I hope they give you a hint at sort of the stuff that we've learned from that. I think that's probably the best thing that I can say. There's a lot in all of them, and we, I think, eat and breathe them so much that it's hard for me to suss them all apart. I think that one thing we have learned in general from a lot of these things are that the more prepared we can be for however esoteric a situation, the better we can build tools, the better we can do everything. That's something that always helps people who administer systems. So we work on that hard for preparedness of various disasters, doing drills, simulating failures, a lot of that. I know Alfred was working on some of that stuff earlier this week. So that's one lesson that comes to mind. Anybody else want to throw in something? I would suggest, if you haven't already, reading our postmortems, that we really try to share this with you so you can see what it's like for us and how we're trying to do that. That question?
Hi, my company is just about to embark on moving some applications to Google Apps and running them in parallel, in fact, with our existing ones. We have a fairly large number of rather hairy Lotus Notes applications that we've been developing for some time. Now, there are a couple of issues that come up from that. The first is, have you guys had any experience with complicated app migration from Notes, or perhaps anyone else in the room who may have some tools that we can use without having to build ourselves? And if I can cram in a second part, I hope it's not divisive, my developers seem to think they want to program in Java. I, on the other hand, prefer the concision and elegance of Python. And I was wondering if maybe there's at least one person on the panel who might be willing to express some views as to why Python might be superior.
So let's tackle your first one. Advice on migrations from Lotus Notes applications. Do we have any?
Oh, do we have?
Yes.
Oh, well, I don't know. You know, part of the, I guess, the interesting part about our job is we don't know what apps most of you guys have written here. The way we find out about apps are people post in the groups, they tell us about it, we hear from someone, a partner contacts us. Occasionally we see apps if there's a problem and we're helping someone with that. So I don't know. I mean, out of all the ones that work, I bet there have been some people, but we don't really have a lot of data on it.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you in the crowd are dealing with Lotus Notes applications that you really want to get rid of? Okay, so a few of you. All right. And then the second question. Oh, okay.
So I know that they've done, I think the Gmail guys have done some stuff with pulling data out of Domino. So maybe track down a Gmail guy and ask them what they've got. Maybe they've got a parser or an API of something to just migrate data in and out of the Domino server.
Well, it's not so much the data. We can write that piece. It's a somewhat painless migration of the applications themselves.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have an answer to that.
Rewrite the applications in Python.
Yeah. I was actually going to refer to Brett because he wrote one of the fastest applications and one of the most popular applications that currently runs on App Engine with the unpronounceable name PubSub Hubbub. And guess which language he used?
Yeah, I use Python. I like Python a lot. I mean, Java, people swear by Java, and I understand why people write in Java. Personally, I really like Python because it's so brief, and I write almost all my apps on App Engine in Python, and I really try to write my example code for talks in Java, but then it doesn't fit on the slide, and so, you know, so this time I really made sure that you could implement everything in Java if you wanted to, so there's no kind of extra missing bit, but yeah, just I can't do it now. Whereas Max breathes Java all the time. I think Don does too. So, and Toby also. So, but yeah, we got at least 2 advocates on the team for Python.
Okay, thank you all.
We all get around. We all get along really nicely. It's kind of boring, actually.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mike Koss from Seattle, a startup called StartPad. I just wonder if you could kind of rate yourselves on your overall service reliability over the last year. And, I think when I was very eagerly one of your first adopters after the first campfire, and I think for the first year we very much understood like this is a beta program and scheduled maintenance outages and long query times and things like that occasionally popped up were kind of expected. But I think when I've been recommending App Engine to other people, I love every aspect of it, except I do have to qualify. I think when I talk to people, I say, you know what, it's kind of still feels a little beta. It still feels like it's not going to be as reliable as you might need for your application. I'd like that to be someday not have to be a qualified answer.
So I think the question was, can we give a rating of how our reliability has been over the last, say, year, and probably as well, what are we doing to address that?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, a rating, I don't know what we would say. But I guess, the things that come to mind for me are, one, please bear with us. These things, the first year, as I can hear from you, it was understandable. Well, the second year, we've grown a lot more. So there's a lot for us to do, and we are trying our very best, and we're we're all professionals here, and we're trying to do the best that we can about it. With that said, I'm actually pretty proud of our reliability. It's terrible, and it's heartrending for all of us, both you guys as users and us as the people who run the system, when we have an outage and we have a problem. When you compare to the typical things you might encounter in standard hosting environments, I'm not sure that we're all that much worse, if worse. It's hard to say because there are no central statistics collected on a distribution of apps, right? Let's say I was to take 100,000 apps that are used every week out of the random cross-section of the internet. How often do they have errors? How often do they have problems? How would we compare? I can't calculate that number, and I can't tell you. So you can each only reach your own conclusions. You know, sometimes part of the problem might be that you see them a lot more with AppEngine because we're under scrutiny. You know, Google's a big company, and so you know about it. You can read about it. And of course, I'm happy about that. Partly I don't like it, but I'm also happy about it because I want to be honest. I want to be transparent so you guys know what's going on. But with other systems, other sites, other smaller hosting providers, you might not know as much either. So.
How would you compare AppEngine to the search site or Gmail?
Well, it's different than the search site, I can tell you that. There are big order of magnitude scale differences between the world's biggest web product, right, and what we're doing here with AppEngine. So some of those things are different. Of course, fundamentally, the product that we're trying to solve is a bit different too. Web search is a single, very, very tuned product. A lot of us in various forms have contributed to web search before we worked on AppEngine. And when you're doing a very specific thing, there's a lot of things that you can do to sort of boost the reliability to make it better that may be domain specific. Nothing that we can do in AppEngine is necessarily domain specific. We try to give you guys the tools to do that, but I completely understand that it's hard to spend a lot of engineering time on a tool that will help you for a 0.1% of the time that your app runs to handle those situations. We do things like that for web search, though. So, you know, for instance, you guys know about the capabilities API or read-only periods. You know about that. We might have more things like that in the future, but I know it can be a lot of work to add that functionality of your app to work in those settings. So I'd say that might be something to compare with, too, that we don't code your app. We can only host it. So some of those other features, we are not in as much control as a single vertical. Well, I don't mean to be rude, but I just see all the other questions coming, so I hate to see someone get interrupted.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, I'm just going to grab a question off the moderator, then we'll get to you. Sorry, man.
You should.
So with the new pricing model, let me see here. What are the approximate limits on monthly bandwidth and storage? And they give the example, can I upload 5 terabytes of my data to my app?
Sure. So you can read a lot more about this online. There is a site published, and hopefully it has a lot of good answers to your questions. To sort of piece apart your question a little bit, you mentioned sort of the limits on usage, and then you mentioned storage, I believe. Storage is separate. And so all of this is still coming together now, but when I spoke today about unlimited, and when we talk about that for your usage, what we're generally talking about is your online usage. The things, since many of you are very familiar AppEngine developers, things like your CPU time and the bandwidth used. Storage is a separate resource. We're still hammering out the details on exactly how that will work. But it is not something that we anticipate to be fully unlimited because it just functions a little bit differently in that setting.
Cool, go ahead.
Oh, I'm Max. So it's somewhat related to the question before this question, and it's sort of a meta question, and bear with me. So you guys are famous for dogfooding, or at least for inventing this word, for coining it, and it seems to me that AppEngine is not being dogfooded. To the extent that, like for instance, what you were saying before, that Gmail, is sort of independent. I don't know if it's running on App Engine or if you want to admit that or not admit that. And it seems that it's, a lot of good frameworks that, or systems are extracted based on usage that you've had, and then you realize that it's important maybe to generalize a little bit. And I thought you were doing this with App Engine, but, from the, struggle from last year and all the issues that you're finding and all the missteps and so on, I have a feeling that maybe that's not what's happening. It's a new product, you guys are inventing it, which is cool, nothing wrong with that, but it creates a whole set of issues because you'll make missteps and you'll have to backtrace and so on. Am I correct in saying this, or am I wrong?
The question is Google dogfooding Google App Engine, essentially?
And was it extracted also? Was it something that was internally being used? Like, for instance, Amazon, a lot of their web services product were being used internally, and then they exposed them.
Did App Engine as a service come up organically, or was it put together as a separate service?
Yeah.
Well, that's a fun background question. The App Engine service, the original project, came together organically. There were some of us who worked at Google, some of us who knew each other, some who had a shared interest. And we were interested in doing what App Engine is, basically what you saw when it initially launched. So we got together and sort of put it together ourselves, started working on it, and much later, it was an actual product and it launched. And I think that's something that's really great about Google. Google really, I've been at Google for a long time now. It combines what I think in some cases is the best of both worlds in terms of top-down and bottom-up. So there are a lot of great ideas that just filter up from engineers who think of them and what they want to do. And a great culture of saying, hey, well, you got an idea, make a prototype. If people like your prototype, you run with it. But there's also some things where we try to, from the top down, say, hey, this seems like an important space to be in, an important thing to do. So I think App Engine, though, when it got started, it was one of the first ones.
I think also that it codifies a lot of the internal best practices that Googlers like Kevin, who've been at the company for a long time, and a lot of our other infrastructure engineers, the best practices that they've gained over time, we've taken those and applied them to the infrastructure. And then now there's a lot of internal apps and even external products like Google Moderator and FastFlip and PubSub and more that are being built on top of App Engine by Googlers as Google products. So it's, it's like, it's not just an extraction like you were saying, but it was extracting a set of best practices.
But why is it so bad and Gmail is so great? I mean, I hate to say it that way, but it seems like, Gmail, fails every now and then, but there's so many people using Gmail. I love it, right? But App Engine, I can't say that. And I know it's a different thing, but like, if I ran Gmail on top of App Engine, I imagine it would fail also, right?
So that's a really difficult question, like the way to phrase it. I mean, I think that we do share a lot of the same backend infrastructure, the same data centers, the same network infrastructure. So a lot of the benefits, it's a big table, and so a lot of us, we share a lot of the same infrastructure. So a lot of the benefits you see in the speed and scalability and distribution and isolation of the problems and stuff like that, we get the same kind of benefits. Where you see some of the other kind of issues was kind of what Kevin was getting back to, which is if you have a single vertical product, you can really focus on a lot of tricks to make sure that it has a higher level of reliability. And so with App Engine, we have this difficulty of saying, we need to let you do anything, but also provide you with reliability. And that's kind of, it's the same trade-off where, it's not perfect, right? And, we started off with penalizing you if you went more than 3 seconds on a request. And now you can burn 30 seconds, right? So, we've gone a long way to give you more functionality to let you do even more stuff, whereas we could have just said, okay, every request, when we launched, every request has to be less than a second on average, and that's it, because that was the way we could control the scalability and reliability, right? So these things are at odds with each other, and I'm very happy with how far we've come in the last 2 years to give more and more functionality while also increasing our reliability. So I hope that's a good answer.
And to that point, it only has been 2 years for us. Sorry, I'm Troy Trimble. I work on App Engine. I'm a software developer. Gmail's been out for 6 years now. So it was like April 2004 or something like that. So, I mean, time, time and developers. Give me 3 years, I'll build something,
Is it still in beta, Gmail?
No, they're no longer in beta.
It's Ryan Barrett, everybody. That's old team member.
Apologize if this was already asked. On the App Engine for Business, we're really excited about just hearing the words SLA and SQL is really just enough to make the trip worthwhile. But the question is, what you demonstrated was an intranet-based application platform. And most of the apps that we build have intranet and different role components, but also have customer-facing components that you would not authenticate to. Is there a model where you can be able to commingle in that space?
So the question is, will App Engine for Business support external-facing applications? You're correct, it was asked before, but not a problem. Yes is the answer to your question. And we could talk a little bit more afterwards. I just don't want to go into it too much.
Yep. Hi, this is Pradeep from Citrix Systems. So the question I had was actually related to a startup request versus a normal request. So the question actually is, why can't a startup request actually happen even before the first call to an instance is made? For example, in our case, like we have like heavy Java Spring applications, and normally the startup requests usually exceed the first 30-second deadline, exceed the exception.
So the question is, why don't we initialize runtimes before we actually send a user request to them? Why is the user request also the loading request?
So I guess the quickest answer to it is we serve a lot of apps. If we need to initialize something for you, for your request, you're going to wait one way or the other because your app is different from all the other apps. So that happens a lot. Now, we are working on some of the things that I was mentioning before. We're working on ways to make this better, ways to hide that time from you. But a lot of those things have to do with reserving things for you, bulking things in advance, so that work has been done in advance for you. But that changes a bit about the platform, so that's why some of these changes are taking a while to get to you.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Burke Floyd. I work for Jordan Howard Technologies. I had two quick questions. One is, do you guys plan on adding support for, say, NetBeans plugins for other developer tools to make it easier to work in those environments? And second question is, has there been any new work for, maybe related to his question, migrating some Google apps or Google products towards using App Engine? Is that in the progress? Any like major tools or major apps that you might be moving that way, or have we seen some other than maybe a PubHub, SubHub, or something like that?
So the first question, can you repeat that again?
Was it the NetBeans? Maybe NetBeans support or other development tools?
Oh, plugins for other, yeah.
For NetBeans, we don't have any specific plans for that. I mean, we developed the Eclipse plugin. There's an IntelliJ plugin which works great, which I use all the time, which was developed by the IntelliJ folks. Our general approach so far has been we do the we're invested in the Eclipse platform, and we do the development there, and we're happy for other development teams to match us and exceed us wherever they feel it's necessary.
There is actually a NetBeans plugin that someone, I think someone at Sun implemented, right?
I'm not sure about Sun, but
yeah, Oracle. Well, whatever. At the time it was Sun. Oracle. Yeah, but so there is one, and we haven't talked to the person. I personally haven't tried it. We can't, I think we actually do mention it in our documentation now. So, but yeah, it's out there, and it was done completely without our help because we made this public tools API that any tools developer can take advantage of.
Right, yeah, so I was going to say the same thing. We actually have a tools API, and they have gone out, and that's what the IntelliJ plugin is based off of. That's what the NetBeans plugin is based off of. But we're actually even going a step further in that we have we've been talking about taking the code that we have for the Eclipse plugin and making that open source, and even going a step further on top of that and trying to orient that code for the Eclipse plugin such that it could be used used from for other plugins in other IDEs. So yeah, we're not directly doing anything for NetBeans, but we're indirectly trying to make more and more of our code usable by other IDEs.
So what was the second question again?
Basically, have you guys seen any over the last year, let's say, any of
the
your major projects?
Internal apps, or the Googlers using App Engine for Google stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that what Ryan was saying before, migrations. Yeah, so I think you should definitely find the video of the talk that Ben Fried, our CIO, gave today. It was earlier in the day, and he talks about the apps they're building and migrating, specifically internal apps. And that's been the first focus on a lot of these things. So I would definitely check that out. And I don't remember if he talks about externalized products also, but that's like probably the best resource for that.
I'm going to grab one moderator question. So how does App Engine uptake over the last few years in terms of types and scale of application fit with your original expectations of App Engine?
Well, I don't know. You should all think of an answer. I think App Engine has grown a lot more than we thought. As I mentioned in the keynote today, 500 million page views. If you count page views, that's daily page views. If you count page views, that's a lot. So that's been more growth than I expected, or I think a lot of us would have expected, and that happened pretty quickly. In terms of number of apps, we see all sorts. We see a lot of really big apps. We see a lot of medium-sized apps. We see a lot of apps that, based on how we think about things at Google, how we measure scale, which is, in these crazy big numbers, because Google tends to do these really big products that we don't think about enough. But we have a huge middle ground in these apps that just have a lot of regular usage. And so that's been a little surprising to me. There's been a lot more of sort of the long tail than I would have thought. What about you guys? Any thoughts?
I was just going to say that in general, we don't know what you're doing with us. Your apps are out there, and most of the time, unless you're driving like huge numbers of traffic or you're getting errors and you're posting on the message groups, if you're a happy customer, we don't generally know what you're doing. We don't know what domain your application is running in. We don't know how much data you're storing. We don't have a good sense of how much traffic it's driving unless it's really sort of at the upper end of things. So I don't know. I think that's a nice attribute of it, that we've just got a big melting pot of applications.
I'd say, yeah, all that's true. And then mobile games. I just keep hearing from developers, they're building backends for mobile apps and mobile games on top of App Engine because it has these great scaling properties. And more people we run into are doing that and finding success with it, which is really great because they see the problem. That, a lot of them are bootstrap startups, finally got their stuff through the App Store, don't have $100,000 to sync on servers and need to support 30,000 users tomorrow. And so it's great to be able to solve this problem for them of really quickly scaling.
Now, I think that we have to wrap up now because I think the session's over, but let me tell you this. We're all here. We've got a big office space that's right up the escalator, and we're around for the whole conference. I would love to answer every single question. I know all of these guys would too, so please track us down, come to the office space, ask us your questions, and we'd love to talk to all you guys more. Thank you for your time.